Today, we're thrilled to have Reza Siksosafai, a groundbreaking Iranian-American filmmaker known for his genre-defying films like the Sundance hit A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night and the AI-driven T2 or Terminator 2 remake, Father Time. That's another one of your new AI films. You have been successful, again, like in projects like A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, Circumstance, and now you're like one of these AI filmmakers that if you go to, folks, go to Google right now, put AI filmmakers, and tell me how long it lasts until you find Reza's name. I think that's the immigrant in you. You're clearly someone that adapts and can wear many hats. How did you incorporate this newer hat of AI into your work?
Wow, that's such a great introduction. Thanks so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to meet you and to be here on your show. Forgive my handheld action here, but I'm not at home. I'm abroad, and but it was really important for me to connect with you and get on this show. So thank you for having me again. I love what you said about connecting it to me being an immigrant and being like needing to pivot is something very important for, because I think immigrants who are in a way are survivors, right? And the way that you survive is by needing to pivot and adjust and adapt. So my family, I was born in Iran, and my family escaped the Iranian Revolution, which actually I feel like is a misnomer. It was more like a civil war. But that was the first major revolution I experienced. And then we ended up in the Bay Area, and I got to experience the Silicon Valley revolution of, personal computers and all that. And then, lived through another one, which was like the internet. And so I've always been around tech stuff, and my dad was one of the inventors at HP Labs. He's got 2 masters from Stanford in computer science and mechanical engineering. And so I was, always around kind of new tech, but I was interested in using it and so, but when the first Adobe Premiere came out, or the first Final Cut, I actually played on the very first iterations of those, and I was really excited about what that was going to do to filmmaking. So what happened with me was actually during the strikes because I'm in the SAG-AFTRA union. And when my union was on strike, I actually had a movie that was greenlit that ended up going away because of the strikes. And so I had a lot of time on my hands. And funny enough, the algorithm on YouTube showed me Theoretically Media's channel, and I was curious, what this was about. People were talking about AI, so I checked it out, and he was talking about Pika, and he was when Pika was first launching, and it looked really cool. I'd never, I'd heard about Discord, I'd never really done it, so I got into Discord. I joined the Pika kind of community and just started to kind of get myself going. I started doing their daily challenges, and I ended up winning them a lot. And so much so that I was told by some of the moderators at the time that they changed the rules. You couldn't win them. You had to wait before you won again because I was winning too many. But because of that, they inducted me into a kind of a super collaborator program. And then from there, I just, started to get involved in the community. I saw as a creative, because I think, you have to be curious, but also get ahead of this technology, because what happened with Netflix, for example, in our industry, we waited too long, and it got too late by the time we had to kind of catch up to what it was and how we could, get residuals, etc. So with this, I was happy to learn that, it actually still needs creative people behind it in order for it to work. It's not like what people are saying. And it's interesting because even, as I've kind of gone on to do a lot of AI filmmaking stuff and the Tribeca Film Festival you were talking about, and I've been doing a lot of press recently, and through that press, it's been interesting to learn that not a lot of people in the press know how AI filmmaking works. So it's been kind of cool to, there's all these misconceptions that you just write something and it comes out completed. And there's a lot of steps to it, obviously. Well, not obviously, but, I know because of having worked on it. So it's been nice to kind of explain to people how it all works. But that's a little history of me and how I got into the AI filmmaking.
I'm glad you did because you brought up so many points that I had questions about and it makes my job so much easier. And the first one is, you're talking about the strikes and having this idle time that many of us in LA had recently. I imagine just like dabbling into AI and starting to learn about these tools, trial and error, that must have been sort of a humbling experience in a way. Walk me through that first feeling, right? Like when you walk in and you're like, even like installing Discord, like the whole thing.
Right.
How did it feel? Because many creatives are going through that right now.
Right. I love that. I love that Tim's going to be on your show too. Yeah, I love discovery and I love being, a genuinely curious. And I also love entering worlds, so Discord is its own world. And I was really curious, what is this world? And, I'm always a little hesitant because I'm like, is this going to be, do you have to have a lot of technical knowledge to get in here or not? And then you can't find out until you try it. But the first feeling of it was, I was excited and curious. And, once I got in and started playing around with Pika, I have to say that, it almost felt like the first time I played on a prototype of the internet at HB Labs that my dad, had privy to. Because as a kid, I remember I told my dad, I'm like, oh, this is like an encyclopedia that never ends. And he's like, yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. And it kind of blew my mind because I was like, you could just maybe access anything. And I had the same thing, when I started prompting and creating visuals. I was like, wait, so, it wasn't necessarily exactly what I was thinking, but it was like something along the lines of what I imagined could be possible to create. So it was freeing. It was also scary isn't the right word, but just like kind of awesome. I was awestruck, but I could see the future within that. And I was like, I have to, because this is going to be a huge part of my industry. That was my first thing, and then, as I started talking to people about it and stuff, not everybody was on the same page as me. But now I'm kind of seeing, well, it's been over a year and I'm seeing that it's starting to come true. So I'm really glad, and I'm trying to help my fellow filmmakers who are curious, who are interested, especially the Tribeca one. A lot of people reached out and it's like, so what's your experience? What do you, how is this? And it's nice to kind of share that knowledge. And I'll tell you, the one thing that I really loved about the AI community is the kindness that everyone displays about sharing knowledge, being very supportive. And it felt very different. Whereas I feel like in the film world, it's very competitive, and there is that kind of community too within the friends that you find. But in the AI community, it was all encompassing, and so it was very welcoming too. So I only have positive things to say about it. I have to say it with the artists, work.
Mm-hmm. And that's a very interesting takeaway. Definitely like the friendliness. As we were speaking before we were on recording, I was at the AI on the Lot Festival. And one of the things that surprised me the most was that I actually felt I was having meaningful conversations. Like everybody had this sort of sense of wonder or like kind of, I get all poetic, connecting with the inner child. But we were like, dude, try this or that. And don't necessarily get that all the time when you go to this industry thing. Sometimes it feels more like you just go through a script of
networking.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, well, let's add each other on LinkedIn. But one thing that is surprising me about what you just said, is this sort of sentiment, right? Because my idea, again, especially AI has lots of bubbles going on. You got the bubble that it's all beautiful and good and the world will be a better place. You got the bubble where the robots are going to kill us all. You got all sorts of opinions, and many times they are on different silos, right? But one of the things that you can see is there's this sort of backlash that's been brewing, which is also natural after so many promises, and so many other nuanced things that, kind of like bring us back to this. But when you're talking to fellow filmmakers, then what I'm hearing from you is that the sentiment you get is more of curiosity rather than being judgmental or any sort of like you're in AI and kind of like stepping back and being weird. Like, is that an accurate assessment?
Well, I mean, maybe those people aren't reaching out, you know. I don't know. So I think there is certainly combinations of reactions. I mean, for the most part, mine has been very positive. I think because people who know me, know just how I go about things. And the people who don't know me, I could see there being, just some ambivalence slash, maybe AI hate. I don't know. I haven't had much of that. But, the other thing that I will say is I've been using AI in a way, not solely, but I've been using AI in a way that I haven't seen other filmmakers do, which was to get around censorship. And that was actually started on International Women's Day. When this last year, a bunch of property, came into public domain. And one of the ones that everybody was super excited about was Steamboat Willie, from Mickey Mouse. I mean, that's cool, but I was really excited about this masterpiece called The Passion of St. John by Carl Dreyer. It's like one of my favorite films of all time. It's a silent film, but it's mostly done in close-ups, and the way it's cut, obviously the story is really incredible, and so are the performances. But the way it's cut, it feels so contemporary, and it's a huge influence on Lars von Trier and his work. But when I saw this, I saw like this kind of direct parallel between what Joan is going through and her persecutors and this by all these religious men as the women in Iran. And so I made a version of that. Mine's called The Passion of Manijit. And I released it on, I made that one with my buddy Shane Willett, who's a really great AI artist that I actually met through Pika. He was one of the moderators at the time. And so we made a silent version. It's called The Passion of Manijit. And the whole idea was like, look, you can have actors that are generated in a film that can't be arrested in a country where there's a lot of censorship like Iran. And what was so cool is after I released it, all these directors from Iran privately messaged me and were like, this is such a really interesting, and I said, look, yeah, the actors can't be arrested, which is great, but still the directors can't. To be really careful, like, what you do. I'm privileged living here. But I had that same approach with my film, with my Sora film, with my film made with Sora for Tribeca. I wanted to kind of continue that. So I just bring that up because when released the first one, The Passion of Manijit, one of the film critics from RogerEbert.com saw it, retweeted it, and said, regardless of what you think about it, this is a very interesting use of it, and bravo Reza, and so it went into a different territory, because it's like, how can you hate on something where we're using it to get past censorship in a country, that's not allowing certain things to be said. So, I just add that into the mix too. I think there's probably a lot of other uses of AI that we're not thinking of right now that are going to come into play that are going to be really interesting test cases. But I find out, and I'll tell you this here because this is the first time, you get to hear it, and I haven't even posted about it yet, but I found out one of the interviews I did for the Sora film, my movie's called Let Your Hair Down, and I did BBC, but I also did BBC Persia, and BBC Persia is going to stream it to Iran, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan, and it's going to be the first time AI movie is streamed to those places. But I'm just really excited about Iran because I get to also, give a message of solidarity to the people there. So it's pretty exciting times, I have to say.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, there's so much to unpack here because first of all, congratulations, especially again, one thing that I can common with you, is this sort of duality of I live in another country, but I miss my country, but I have elements of both countries. So, it's always like these things are near and dear. And again, as artists, these are the things that matter. I mean, it's great to get paid and be able to make a living creating things. But also, when you can tell that it's such an impact, especially I imagine for you, because again, while there's a lot of performance in folks that align with, for example, the feminist cause. You have been someone that has consistently been, again, let's go back to, A Girl Walks Alone at Night. It's been sort of like a North Star and what you create. But now, interesting thing that you're mentioning, and I have never heard before until you brought it up, is AI being able to circumvent censorship, and it's such an interesting thing because one of the things when I started this podcast, I thought I was going to be talking about prompts and stuff like that.
Right.
Got to almost 20 episodes later, half of the episodes are about diversity and like invisible data, the data gap. So at a time when there's so much conversation about diversity and inclusivity as if it was such a terrible thing, I hear this and the reflection that I can have is like, well, this is a kind of thing where like, don't we see the importance of diversity? Look at this use that obviously for you, it makes sense because it's what you experience. But for someone that was born maybe in Silver Lake here in California, maybe they didn't have to worry about those things. Right. So maybe they will not be seeing this. So it's more of a question, is a reflection, right? Because I'm sort of blown away by this censorship thing that I had not thought about until you brought it up, right?
It was interesting because when you were talking about diversity and we were talking about this specific example, I was thinking about, I've been having dialogue with OpenAI and they're very curious, how they can improve Sora, and they've been really receptive to, because I've been giving my own wish lists as a filmmaker and what I think, could be great. And they've been really receptive to that. But also they were asking, like things that don't work. And, for example, one of mine was that, if I was to prompt an Iranian woman, I couldn't do that because in my film, it deals with, women who don't wear hijabs. And in this, it automatically, as an Iranian woman, put in someone who was wearing a hijab. I had to, get a little bit creative with the prompting so that the woman still looked Iranian. But I could never use the word Iranian. And I'll say this too for them, which is really, I was impressed with, and I'm hoping that, most of these generators are going to go there, is you can't reference any person or like, a movie like, shot like David Lynch or, in the style of this person. You can't do that. It won't prompt it. And I like those restrictions because I think, you shouldn't, I feel like that's ripping off people. And so what's nice is it forces you, and I actually started this thing I call it ethical prompting. And I started a while back and they were really into this idea. And I just was like, I said, your tool really emphasizes, ethical prompting, which is because I stopped using references to anybody or anything and like get my own idea out there. And the way I was approaching it was that, so if someone at some point was like to say, hey, I have a problem with this is my, thing or whatever, like I could show them my prompt and be like, see, this is like a description that I wrote, and that has nothing to do with like referencing someone else or, something else. And so, yeah, it's a really fascinating time. And I think that these things are going to evolve. The other thing that I'll say about, which is interesting is, and it's funny because you said you don't talk about prompting, and here we are talking about prompting, but
But this is a cool conversation about prompting. You're not telling me, Juan, I'll tell you, ChatGPT just destroyed Adobe Premiere the 10 prompts to make an Oscar-winning movie, because I'd be like, Reza, sorry, I need to hang up the conversation. But it's a much more interesting conversation with her, so it's fine.
It's so funny because you reminded me, there was this group that was in a group, and so as a joke, this is like some months back, but as a joke, I wrote, because people would come in, new people, the group, and they'd ask a question, and sometimes they were pretty outlandish questions, like they obviously didn't understand yet, what it was capable of and what it wasn't. And so as a joke, and, going back to what you're saying, is I said, hey, I pretended, to be new. I just said, I'm just curious, is there is there like a tool that I can use where I can just write in one sentence and it can be a feature-length movie that's a commercial success that wins all the Oscars? Because people were responding to that as if it was a serious request. I should have probably written or something like that to give it away, but I just was like, no, there's still a lot of work that needs to go in, to make something interesting. So, what I was going to say about prompting was that, what's interesting about Sora is that it doesn't have a limitation on prompt length. And, you know, we had a very limited time with the model that we used to make the movie. And it was actually really interesting because we were in production on the films as the festival was going on, you know, which I've never had that experience before. But because there's no limitation, is like I write like mini scripts for each, you know, like if it's, especially if it's like a 20-second long section, it's, you know, because I'm a screenwriter as well. And so I just really took that on, you know, in terms of like getting into the details of the mise en scène, right? Like every aspect, lighting, the colors, you know, the sets, the subject. I mean, anything that's in the frame, right? And the composition, the angle. And so, and then it can take those and then it breaks them down, and then you can then go and fix them and make them long. But I really like this no length limit, and I know, you know, I know some of them, the work there say that like it works best within this like number of words, but I, you know, politely disagree. I think there's something to like putting all those details that then ends up giving you what it is that you know you're interested in receiving back. So I find that really fascinating that it can be almost like a mini script for each prompt. I mean, you can write something really simple too, but that's just, you know, I heard from them, they're like, we've never seen prompts this long. And I was like, well, you know, what can I say? I just really got into the detail. I hope they will change that, you know.
And walk us through the experience of using Sora, because I imagine, especially after we see all those videos online before anybody got to play, or like very few people, like how did you get in contact with the OpenAI people to get this invitation? And then what were the things that surprised you, that both blew your mind away, or that you were like, this is maybe not that crazy as I thought? Like, what were your initial sensations?
Well, I mean, I was very excited to be invited because I knew how exclusive it is. And so that was first. I was invited by Tribeca. I'm an alum there. So they invited, you know, Tribeca alums to be part of this and commissioned us to make these shorts. There was limitations on them. No violence or nudity, and only text to video of that model at the time. You know, because, you know, as we know in AI, things shift and dramatically and are changing all the time. So yes, I went in, you know, I was really curious, and immediately I was struck by the quality of the video, and just, I couldn't believe, you know, that you could get a generation that was 20 seconds long. And then, yeah, it was a matter of really, you know, with all these generators, you have to learn how to speak to them, right? And they're all have their own kind of quirks. It's not one size fits all. That's why I don't understand these. I mean, I get why they do it, but like, you know, people do these tests of like, they put in a prompt and they put them into different generators and they put them side by side. I'm like, well, you know, that's not been my experience. I think that each one like has its way of approaching, you know, it. And so I was trying to learn that. And then, you know, I was interested in not to get, you know, too pretentious or whatever, but, you know, I love film criticism and film scholars and film critics. And, you know, one of my favorites is André Bazin, the French critic, you know, who was instrumental in creating the French New Wave. You know, he was the first one, you know, starting to write about film and Faire du Cinema. And one thing he always talked about was that the truth in cinema lies in the long take. And, you know, paraphrasing it, but like, you know, and I've experienced that. You know, there's something like, even if you're not aware that it's a long take, there's something that happens within you, you know, subconscious, that you are witnessing something, and it just feels like there's a tension because you don't know when the cut is going to come, but you also know that this is all happening. You know, whether it's the magic of cinema behind it, but it just, there's a different kind of reality that you connect with. And so even though I was doing transitions and trying to create, you know, I'll just say this, like when I first got the opportunity, and I knew it was OpenAI, you know, the biggest AI company in the world, and Tribeca, one of the biggest film festivals, I knew it was a big platform. And so for me, it was really important to do something about Iran, because it was out of the news cycle. It's obviously dear to my heart, and the people are still suffering. So I knew I wanted to do something, but I'm like, you know, what am I going to do? Because I like form to follow content. And so one of the things I discovered early with Sora was the way that I dream, not necessarily the way that, like, I love Paul Trillo's work, and I think he dreams maybe differently, like the way the stuff that, but the way I dream is different. And I saw, like, I could get out of Sora within the time like we had something very similar to the way I dream. And I was like really intrigued by that. And I'm like, what does dreams have to do with Iran? And they've suffered a lot of trauma as a result of what happened in Iran. And, fortunately through trauma therapy and stuff, that I've been able to, because I almost took my own life, and which was a direct result of this trauma. And I was fortunate enough that didn't happen. I've never felt better in my life, as a result of the trauma therapy. Mm-hmm. But one thing that happens when you're experiencing trauma is the world becomes hyper real, and so, which is very dreamlike. And so that was a connection with Iran. And then there was this idea that, poetry is huge to us. We have some of the greatest poets in the world, right? Rumi and Khayyam and Saadi and Ferdowsi and Anha. So I was like, wow, dreams and poetry, there's a parallel, right? And poetry to me is much more similar to cinema than the novel, right? And so that and the trauma and then knowing that I wanted to kind of tell a story around the women of Iran, that all kind of came together to coalesce into making something with Sora. And it was really exciting to me when I could see the results come out. I was talking about this 20-second length takes. Like, I didn't want to do one where, it's just following someone walking down the street for 20 seconds. That's going to be cool, but that's not what I was interested in. I wanted it to kind of go in and out of different worlds, but still feel fluid, like Anne-Faith Bazin was talking about, like that you sense in your subconscious that this is just one take. And usually maybe you would do those things with VFX and, interesting cutting and, camera trickery. And then you also have to have a budget, for that, but I was, really thrilled that you could write this really long, this mini script, and after trial and error, get something very close to what you were seeing, or what I was seeing. So it was really thrilling for me, I have to say. Generate that. I haven't made things that are very, dreamlike in that way, but it also it hits you. It's like there's. I feel like there's you get the feeling of the story and the power of it, but the way dreams work, man. Dreams hit you in your heart and your subconscious in a way that, because you're not worried about the narrative and trying to figure it out. It's just coming straight at you, feeding you. So yeah, it was an exciting one. It was I have to say this about me. I'm happiest if I'm around the people that I love, right? And if I'm creating. If I'm not creating, and AI gives me this ability that in any moment, I'd wake up. I remember when I was making this thing, I'd wake up in the middle of the night, have a dream that I wanted to dream, and I'd put in write it out, and then go back to bed, and then wake up, and then have a little present there for me, to look at. It's incredible. It's a wonderful time to be creative.
Mm-hmm. And first of all, I'm very glad that you're still with us, and I appreciate you being vulnerable enough to share this, because also I think, especially in the U.S., it's very important to have conversations about mental health, right? Which is something that has such a stigma here, and it might not be accessible to most folks, those of us that are lucky enough to get access to it. Definitely, it shows how important it is. One of the things I think about this podcast, and the reason why I like doing it, is because in one single episode, we can talk about prompting, go through, how AI can help us circumvent censorship or keep artists safe in places where, again, right, maybe here in the U.S., folks are not so used, and hopefully they will never be used to having to hide what they think. I mean, some things the parallels are getting a bit scary lately. But, right. I appreciate you bringing all these items into the conversation, because I think when we're trying to understand AI, it's not only about the prompts, it's not only about runway. And again, these are very valid conversations. IP, right? Like, I've had my own content scrape, literally found out 19 I come from YouTube. 19 of the videos I work on have been used to train databases. But again,
Wow.
there's a lot, probably your stuff too, so don't worry. I'm sure they got you too. I'll share the page, where you can check that stuff. So I'm not special. Most of us, if we put something on the internet, we're like non-remunerated collaborators. Anyway, what I love about this conversation is that you brought up so many items, especially when I think, okay, 20 episodes in, what the hell can I talk about that has not been discussed? And here you come, and brought up like 4 different things, that we've never touched on. So I really appreciate that. Now, for the creator that is watching this, and at this point, I'm sure they're convinced because you made a very compelling argument for like AI as a tool to like augment creativity beyond like the cliches, right? Beyond the usual PR pitch of AI democratizes blah, 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 which I personally, I don't like it. But like you brought a lot of human stuff. Now, for these creatives that are listening to this, watching it, how would you say, what's that first step they want to take beyond ChatGPT?
Well, first of all, I'll just say, I think if you're interested in AI filmmaking, you should learn filmmaking first, because that, I've had the luxury of learning about that, not only, through school and my own study, but like making movies, which is the best way. I still agree with Tarantino. It's like, take the money, don't worry about going to film school, make a movie. Because I think it feeds into everything that you're going to be doing, and even breaking the rules. So that's first and foremost. And knowing like film language and it is its own language and not necessarily again to emulate it, but if you want to break it, but just to know what exists and, why certain shots or, angles or, what feeling does it give you? What's happening? So I think that's really important, but I don't envy people coming into it right now because there's so much happening. It's like, it almost can be overwhelming. Whereas like when I first came in, it was really simple. But I think you can simplify it for yourself, which is learn one tool, and don't worry. I mean, like, everybody's going to be like, because I used to do a lot of electronic music and it was, there's always new gear coming out. And I had friends, who were obsessed with like just getting the new gear and they weren't writing much music. And I feel like AI can kind of become that too, right? Like you can get this new thing, you're like, oh my God, look at the fidelity of this, and you make like a short, clip of something, and then you go on to the next thing. It's almost addictive. So I would just, emphasize, learning one tool. So, visual, and then you're obviously going to need some sort of audio and lip sync. But then I guess the final thing I would just say, which I guess goes back into the filmmaking, is I think storytelling is king or queen, whatever you want to call it. It's just, I think storytelling is paramount. And even if you're breaking the rules, but I think that's what sets you apart now with AI. Because, and here's the other thing too, is we're going to get to this phase, just like filmmaking, and I think we're there, is, editing is an art form. Visuals, right, are an art form. Like being a director of photography is an art form. Writing a script, is an art form. Now, you should find out what your strength is within AI. Because the other thing, the false sense that these tools give us is that we can do it all. And I'll watch, films where like the visuals are amazing, but the script and, music and everything is just kind of like the same stuff that everybody's using. You know what I mean? It's like the same narrative, getting actors. So for me, I think what's exciting is getting a collective of people to work with. Like that movie that you mentioned, one of the movies you mentioned, the, Travel Through Time film, right? That we did, Father Time. But that was, the 3 of us were paired together randomly to make that. And it was such a great experience. Like I just loved being with the people in person. And there was something different than like being on Zoom or Discord. Like when you're, together as human beings, creatively discussing ideas. And honestly, we're less than 48 hours. It was called 48 hours, but it was really less than 48 hours to make it. But the best part about, the thing that took the longest and almost was like the most fun on some level was coming up with the story. And that took the longest, like to kind of hammer out together. And then once we had that, it was just like, okay, who's going to implement which tool in the best way. And then sometimes, you have happy accidents along the way. But yeah, I mean, I know that's a list of different things, but I think story is paramount. Learn one or two tools really well, because the basics of all those are going to go into the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And then know what your strength is. Find what your strength is within that. Maybe you can excel in some other things. Acting is not going away. I'm trained as an actor, and like a performance, like an amazing actor, let's say like Joaquin Phoenix, right? AI is not going to be able to recreate that. You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, we'll be able to maybe film it and change it and all this stuff, but you're not, I mean, that type of level of humanity is not going to be replaceable. So, maybe collaborate with some great actors, and it'll elevate your movie to another place. So hopefully that's helpful, but yeah.
I think it is. Again, I think especially as we have more and more and more content, which is already happening anyway. So I don't think AI in that sense is going to change that much. What's going to resonate with people is that ability to connect, to feel seen, which is what art has always been and what makes art transcend time, right? Because folks are connecting and making that story theirs. And that's, I think, the magic of art. So, Reza, this has been an amazing, amazing, amazing conversation. When I say, talking about human creativity with AI as a stage prop, I think this has been the episode that literally is like the poster child for that very romantic expression that I like to use. So
I love it.
I know Father Time is available on YouTube for folks to watch, and we'll have the link here in the description. Is there anywhere else where folks, and I know the Terminator 2 trailer, it's also there, but is there anywhere else where folks can watch the work you're doing with AI?
Yeah, I'm mostly on X. So my X handle, it's funny because I say X, I still think Twitter, and then I have to translate my mind to say X. But it's Resurrection, and it's spelled oddly, but I'm sure you'll have it under there. But it's spelled like my first name, Reza, Reza. Okay, yeah, there you go.
We'll have it here on the screen popping up for everyone to audience.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's the place. I mean, and I'm a little less, I'm trying to I'm working on longer projects, and I'm trying to get, because I don't think, I think AI can be used in really interesting ways, that it doesn't have to be all AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it be, partially, and then, with, if there's budgetary restrictions for whatever. So I'm, right now in the process of some feature-length films that I'm trying to get off the ground that will use that. So, those require more time and less, just kind of posting, fun stuff. But I'll also just, say, I can't say too much about it, but I'm about to officially launch it publicly, but there's a new company that I've formed with some of the best AI artists in the world. That's an agency/tech company. And we've already got some really amazing projects that we're working on before having launched. But that'll be cool because we're going to be taking on other people, and we are all creatives who've had successful businesses. So we just decided, why let someone else take all the, the hard work that we do and the money, from it. So why don't we, because we can generate this, but we're going to need more artists, because as the company is growing already before even being launched. And the cool thing about our company is anyone who comes and becomes, as an artist that works with us, has a little piece of the company, because we want to do it right like that. So yeah, that's pretty exciting.
That's pretty exciting. So, Reza, if you have any links for those AI artists watching the podcast, to get in touch, we'll be adding it to the description as well. Reza, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an amazing episode. We'll have all the links here in the description. And for the rest of you, thank you for watching Creativity in Robots or for listening. I appreciate you popping up. Hope to see you again for the next episode. We'll see ya.
Amo la creación en mi pantalla, bits y bytes en danza, todo brilla, cada código que escribo canta. Sabor a cumbia.